Welcome! I'm Johan Nilsson.
And I'm Lincoln Murphy, and this is Impact Weekly.
We're here to help you make your customers successful. Each week, we answer your most pressing customer success management questions by relying on our years of experience with companies around the world.
Let's get this going. Right, so we are back for another question. This week's question is about quarterly business reviews, doing appointments with the customer. I think that's something all of us do all the time in customer success. So let's get into it. The specific question is this. I have a target of doing at least 4 appointments per week with business review with my customers. It eats up a lot of time, and I don't see a lot of positive coming out of these QBRs. So that's the question, Lincoln. What do you say?
Yeah, there's actually a lot going on in this question. I think, we kind of have to take a step back real quick and think about, I think, first of all, why do we have meetings with customers? And I know that's such a basic question, and it's like it should be obvious, right? But I think sometimes these really obvious things that we do all the time are not super obvious. We haven't really thought about it. So I think the main thing we want to focus on here is, are we delivering value to our customer? Is our customer getting something from us that's going to help them be successful? And so we'll talk about that in a lot more detail in a second. Yeah. And I think, again, the one thing I want to focus on real quick at the beginning here is a target of doing a certain amount of appointments. There's
exactly.
That's there's well, you had some interesting thoughts on that, sort of where that might come from.
I think what you can read between the lines here is that this person now has been given a target to do 4 appointments per week. And that's, I think, probably coming from someone managing customer success here with maybe a sales background. In sales, of course, it's very common to have like a quota on number of appointments per week or per month. And trying to put that type of metric into customer success that can be really harmful even. So I think that's one way to unpack this question is to, first of all, is that the right way to go here? So I think that's one part of the question that's really interesting. So I know this can be the case. And the second part of the question is, this person now doesn't seem to get any positive out of these meetings. They are forced or made into doing every week. So I think there's a lot going on in the question here that can be read between the lines as well.
Yeah, what you just said is really interesting. Sort of where this might be coming from, this mentality of having a certain number of meetings that we need to have. Look, there are operational metrics that head of customer success is going to put in place that would indicate whether a CSM is doing the things necessary or that we believe would be necessary to move the customer towards their goal, towards some level of success, right? Yeah. Those operational metrics will influence, or if we're designing this properly, should influence what we call the NRR roll-up metrics, the things that roll up to net revenue retention, like churn, contraction, expansion. So the operational metrics should be in service of that. Yeah. But where we see things kind of go off the rails is when these quote unquote operational metrics, like you have to have a certain number of meetings, are just there without any consideration for why or what they're actually in service of. And so I think if that disconnect is there, then we have a problem. And I'm guessing, based on the question, that we're kind of in that situation where it's just a number of meetings and it's not really based on anything that is meaningful and really helping the customer. So I think that's number one. So I think you made a
Exactly.
really good point there.
And
But I think the second part is the kind of the critical
yeah,
piece.
I think that's the one to zoom in here. But just one more thing on that.
Mm.
Because if you put up a target on strict target and you drive hard on customer success managers doing specifically for 4 meetings per week, then they will fight to get those meetings. But
Mm.
but does that mean that we're really actually doing any progress, having any impact on our customers with those meetings? I mean, and that's, as we know, that's what it's all about. So it can be really actually harmful both for yourself and what your team is doing to set these very hard targets. But even worse, you can actually be doing harm to your customers here as well.
Wow. Okay, so that's really interesting. And if you bring back into it where you were talking about this sort of coming from, right? Somebody
Yeah.
that has a background maybe in sales. So now they're running a customer success organization, or it's a customer success, a head of customer success that has been studying sales playbooks, right?
Yeah.
And so we're thinking we need to have a certain number of meetings. But what they're missing is that even a salesperson who is employing those new business sales tactics that are necessarily aggressive because they're trying to get meetings with people with prospects with whom we don't already have an existing relationship, right? That's hard stuff to do. They have
Yeah.
to be a little bit more on the aggressive side of things.
Yeah.
They have to have a certain number of meetings because those meetings, it's all a numbers game at some point, right?
Yeah.
The way people convert through a sales funnel. Well, even then, even when it's a numbers game like that, those meetings that they're trying so hard to get in sales, they still have value. There's something going on in those meetings to move the prospect forward in that sales process.
Yeah.
So it's still not just about getting the meeting. But you kind of come back to this question. It sounds like the meetings, the metric of having a certain number of meetings, like that is the most important thing. And the meetings themselves, well, they're not really that valuable. So even even if we were taking this from a sales playbook, those meetings still have to provide a lot of value, and in the sales example, move the prospect towards essentially closing the sale.
Yeah.
And here we are in customer success trying to follow that playbook and then not actually doing anything with those meetings. So you brought up a really interesting origin story of where this most likely comes from, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. And also to the second part of the question here, this person is not seeing a lot of positive coming out of these meetings. So maybe we should level set a little bit around what is positive in this context as well.
Mm.
So this person doesn't see any positive coming out of them, but what about the customer?
Yeah.
Most likely the customer is not seeing any positive coming out of them either. And what does that mean for us if we keep doing a lot of meetings, which are at best doing very little for the customer, but maybe even doing, harm or putting up a negative situation for us with the customers? Then we're driving really hard on this. That's actually we're putting ourselves in a really bad situation.
Yeah, this is okay. So this is really fascinating. So we said there's a lot going on in this question. There's actually even more going on in this question, where the presumably a CSM is asking or is saying, I'm not seeing a lot of positives out of this. And to your point,
Yeah.
Well, from whose point of view, right?
Yeah.
In theory, if the customer was seeing something positive out of it, you as the CSM would be seeing something positive out of it too. But it's also possible that the CSM could be seeing something positive, but the customer not. And that would be if the CSM is focused on, just kind of getting through agenda items, kind of powering through the call, and then saying, I checked all the boxes. I checked everything off the list. So it was successful from my point of view. And when the customer is sitting over there going, what was that? That was not incredibly helpful. So you make a really good point. Like, what does positive mean in this case? And I would say if you don't know if your customer is getting a positive experience from this meeting that we're having, like, you should start there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, but that's where we need to start here, and maybe we should also quarterly business reviews. There's a lot of like names around meetings. Maybe we should also, if we start moving from what should this person do, how can we help them, maybe we should look into that as well. What are these type of meetings that we have with the customers, and also in the next step, look at how should we do these meetings.
For sure. So I think in, just like a lot of things in customer success, there's a lot of different ways that things can be interpreted, and people have different terms and stuff for different things. I basically come down to there's three kinds of meetings that we have with our customers. Essentially, there's going to be sort of routine meetings, and these are these are meetings where we're going to. They're nothing special in that they're just part of the process of moving the customer towards their towards success, towards their goal. So these are going to be, maybe it's training, maybe it's doing some work with them, maybe it's kind of just reviewing their progress, but on a more frequent basis. So it's like, let's meet next week, kind of see what you did on your own, and then we'll kind of figure out where to go from there. So things like that. That's kind of what I would call a routine meeting. I would even include in that a meeting where a customer has an issue, and you're sort of, you're being reactive to their inbound request. It's still just kind of a routine meeting.
Yeah.
In other words, not a lot of prep, right? You're not going to, this isn't a big presentation that you're going to give. You're not going to have to do a lot of prep work for this. Then you get into account reviews and business reviews. And so the way that I make the distinction there is that account reviews are, they're a review of the account. They're a review of how the customer is sort of interacting with our product. This is where you get into usage and statistics and things like that. Yeah. This might just be with a couple of people from their side, an admin and maybe a power user or whatever. It's really more focused on the account, and you will bring into that some of their higher level business goals, but it's going to be heavily weighted towards the things that are going on with their account. A business review is kind of the opposite of that. It's going to be heavily weighted towards their business. Exactly. Right. And their business and how it's being impacted by their use of our product and their interactions with our company. It's going to be heavily weighted towards the goals that you had, and where did you reach those goals? Where are you at now? And your future goals. And then you're going to bring into that how the product will help, but it's going to be heavily weighted to the business goals and their actual progress against those. And those are going to have, maybe some executives, some business users on their side. It's going to be far less tactical, far less functional, that kind of thing. Now, that might happen on a quarterly basis. We would call that a quarterly business review. It might happen with high-level executives. We might call that an executive business review. But that's kind of my three distinctions there: routine meetings, account reviews, and business reviews.
Some have these quarterly business reviews once a year, right?
Well, that my joke is always, how often do we have quarterly business reviews? But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's less frequent. In that case, you could just not call it a quarterly business review and call it what it is. But also, if you do want executives to show up, a trick is to simply call it an executive business review.
Yeah.
Because executives are attracted to things that say executive. But the bottom line is it's a business review. It's a review of their business as it is impacted by their relationship with our company, versus an account review, which is really more about their relationship with our company and their use of the product and that kind of stuff.
And it can get really messy if you try to mix these meetings, right, in one session.
I mean, absolutely. You do not want to be doing low-level account review usage patterns and stuff like that when you have their executives on the meeting expecting to go over their high-level goals. Yeah. It's a great way to ensure that the executives on their side never attend another one of your meetings.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes to the higher level idea here, and you were
Exactly.
you started to talk about this earlier, which is, if the customer's not getting value, what are we teaching them?
Yeah, no, but that's great. All right, so that on that, let's help this person now. What should this person do and we specifically talk about how can we achieve more things with our meetings we do with the customer. So let's give this person 3 very concrete things to start doing.
Sure. So I have a couple right out of the gate that I think are really important. We have to have a clear agenda for the meeting that's built around what's in it for them.
Oh, yeah.
And that, the distinction there is the part about what's in it for them. It can't just be an agenda of where it's things that you want to go over because they're things that either you feel like you need to, or you've been told that these are the things we want to go over. If you don't know what's in it for them, like if you can look at a line item and you can't figure out why they would care about that, then it probably shouldn't be part of the meeting, right? That's how we need to be thinking about it. So a very clear agenda, and also communicate that and get their feedback on that before the meeting. Make sure that there's nothing on there that they would rather postpone, or other things that they would like to talk about instead. So have a clear agenda built around what's in it for them. Structure the entire meeting workflow in the meeting itself. And what I mean by that is, very often we may have some structure around the way that we set up meetings, the way that we schedule meetings. We may have some structure around the meeting itself. We just talked about having an agenda, but there's a lot more to the process of setting up a meeting and confirming a meeting and making sure that everything is still on track for that meeting. And then, actually working the meeting itself. Even if you just have the agenda, you still want to have a framework for that meeting that includes, the pleasantries at first, time checks, making sure that everybody is there, and having that something that is consistent across all the meetings that we do. We just don't want to be doing these things sort of haphazardly, and you want to get away from the chaos, right? So try to have the whole process of getting the meeting set up and actually doing the meeting, and then having the follow-up from that meeting. Have all of that structured and planned out ahead of time. I think you're going to be in a much better place to ensure that the meetings that you are having are actually valuable certainly for the customer and ultimately for you.
Definitely. And I think just the point on that one is that, sometimes when you're with a really experienced customer success manager, all of these things just seem to flow smoothly. And if you're new in customer success, you might think you don't get that flow. And that comes down to actually, you have to practice these things, like to have a really good meeting with all the structure around it. It takes practice. That's why like a senior person is doing it very smoothly, because they've done it a lot of times. So one way to do that is also to practice on this, how to work through a meeting and what things can come up. And I think that leads into number 3 here as well, which is practice is one thing, but it's also around how we prepare for this meeting. So we can go into the meeting with what we call an objective confidence, that we know a lot about the customer. We have prepared, we know the context they're in, the status of the customer, everything. So we can really be present in the meeting. And part of that preparation is also what things might come up here. What kind of objections will this customer come up with? What kind of questions do I need to bring into the meeting so I can get the meeting where I want it? And what will the potential objections be from the customer side, and prepare on those. So I think the third part here is a lot to make this a great meeting is preparations and presence. And what's good with this is that we know this is skills. And in our Impact Academy, we have this objective confidence framework where you get to work with all these things. So I think that's number 3 here. All right, so those are the 3 things to do. Great question, a lot into this question. So good luck with this, and talk soon. Hey, thanks for listening. Do you want to bring your customer success to the next level? Check out Impact Academy. We have training programs for customer success managers and for leaders in customer success.